Greetings. Let's see. There's many things I wanted to talk about today, and the first of which is the following. Whoops. It's Tracy's birthday today. Enough of that. Okay. So, many happy returns. Now, the next thing, the agenda. I had this little quotation. There's been several things in the media about writing. I guess writing is more people are beginning to realize a big part of our life, and so that was in last week, I think. And one of my favorites was Russell Baker's column 2 or 3 weeks ago. Do you remember this one? Or did any of you run across this? It's very hard to get a headline like this through the systems these days. But here he's talking about using his word processor. Okay, now so man's quest is eternal, but what specifically is it that he quests, and why does he? Mankind's quest is man's and woman's quest, mankind's and womankind's quest, humanity's quest for the perfect writing device. Eternal has been humanity's quest. Eternal have been many of humanity's. From the earliest cave writing, eternal has been the quest for a device that will forever prevent writers from using the word. But he's succeeded here, I think, in capturing the thoughts that go through a writer's mind when writing an essay. So it's easier to revise and edit with a computer than with a typewriter or pencil. This amazing machine makes it very hard to stop editing and revising long enough to write a readable sentence, much less an entire column. So that's anyway. That was one. Here's Paul hands me this from last Friday's New York Times. He didn't acknowledge where he had stolen something and put a noose around his thick neck. Quotes can be dangerous if you don't acknowledge the source. Okay, so here we are acknowledging the source, New York Times, Friday the 13th. I got a alumni magazine from Caltech. Take a look at this cover picture here. It has a picture of one of my heroes on the cover. Guess which gentleman it is. And but it talks about the story of Professor Feynman and his reminiscences of serving on the Challenger. On the panel that investigated the Challenger disaster last year. And he has... so he has... he has a terrific sense of humor, I think, among all the people that have been able to write humorous things in science. Besides being, of course, a brilliant scientist, Nobel Prize winner, and everything else, he has a way of giving a lecture. If you ever have a chance to hear him, he can convey technical stuff and still amuse you simultaneously better than anybody else. But he's talking here about this is a transcript of a talk that he gave, and he starts out and he says, before I tell you about the shuttle, I thought it would be interesting to you all to see the costume that I assumed in order to move around the natives without being too conspicuous in Washington. They wear this kind of coat because it's a little bit cold there. It snows sometimes. He's a professor at Pasadena in Caltech, of course. So then he talks about it. So then he says, now that you've seen the equipment, I'm going to take it off and everything. So that was undoubtedly the suit that he's shown with on the cover of this magazine here. Now, but then immediately he goes into a discussion of the Challenger, and in a way that even I could understand what the technical problems were, and then he got through that quickly in a few pages. But then he starts, so then he talks about the issues about the commissions. It's really, I really enjoyed reading this article. Well, the thing I wanted to show you was some of the things that he commented on had to do with writing in the middle of this. So let's see, where are we? Oh, here's one. So let's see. All this time I expected we would be meeting in Washington to discuss what we had found out so far, to think it out together and look at it from different perspectives. In addition to the astronauts on the panel, there were lawyers, industrialists, there were scientists and engineers and so on, and to discuss with each other where to go where to go next. So, but in our meetings, all we ever did was what they called wordsmithing, correcting punctuation, refining phrases, and so on. We never had a real discussion of ideas. Besides the wordsmithing, we discussed the typography and the color of the cover. At each meeting, we were asked to vote, so I thought it would be efficient to vote for the same color we had decided on in the meeting before. It turned out I was always in the minority. We finally chose red. It came out blue. No, you know, any humorist could give these lines, but he was made some decent points here, and I find. Also, though, that his emphasis on wordsmithing is, you know, he's giving it a negative thing, but it is becoming part of our lives more that we want to find the proper place for it, and he talks about an appendix that he wanted to write for their report. I'd go for a while. When I come back, the appendix would be lost. But I kept pushing on it, watching it, nursing it along. I finally got it through to the point where it was at last in the hands of a real editor, a capable man by the name of Hansen, who changed all my whiches to that's and that's to whiches. Mr. Hansen fixed up my report without changing the sense of it. Then Mr. Keel, the assistant to the chairman of the committee, fixed it up so that it could go in as an appendix. He put all kinds of big circles around whole sections with X's through them. There were all kinds of thoughts left out. He explained to me that my report was repetitious with the main report, and I argued it's much easier to read something that's all together because it's going to be an appendix. It didn't matter for repetition, but anyway, that's okay. So there is wordsmithing going on, and I find how many of my waking hours are spent with things like commas and periods. Do I consider that really of no value whatsoever? And the answer is that I consider it's a much greater percentage of what I really am supposed to do in my life than I would have believed before, and that's why I'm teaching this course this quarter. On the other hand, I don't think that it's the only thing I do, and so when I comment on when I have to write notes on a student thesis or almost anything else where I have to make technical criticism, I find that my comments have quite a range. Some of them will be completely scientific. They'll say, you know, this, what you want is a different theorem here, or the theorem is wrong, or you want to, you know, or some will be more strategic, saying, how about some motivation? Here's an idea for motivation. But many of them will be saying which should be that, or something with commas and so on. And so it ranges all over this line. But still, I see that it would be a mistake for me to say that I was going to limit myself to any one of those particular things. I think that it's all part of life. It's all an important thing has to go in. Well, I hope this gets circulated so that a lot of people can read it. It's a neat article.
Can I just make a comment about Feynman? He's pulled a good trick, being as famous as he is. He has about a dozen books in print, and he hasn't written any of them himself. They were all lectures he gave, and other people did the writing.
I see. Yeah, he's extremely good at lecturing. That's right. But wordsmithing is not one of his things. Yeah, no, that's right. In fact, this was written by the same person who Ralph Layton, who did the Surely you're joking, Mr. Feynman. The Feynman lecture of physics too, yeah.
As a freshman, I used to go to his advanced quantum mechanics class and leave believing that I understood what he'd talk about.
Yeah.
Don, it's a good tradition. That's what we have of Aristotle's as well.
Yes. Oh, okay. Yeah, right. Julia, please push the button.
I had the privilege of interviewing him when I was an archivist in Los Alamos.
Oh.
And I have a tape recording
Los Alamos,
of that interview.
Yeah, Julia lived in Los Alamos for 2 or 3 years, I guess. And he in his book, you're joking, Mr. Feynman, he has wonderful stories about how he picked the locks in Los Alamos, and it was sort of the most important thing. I mean, the science would have flopped if he hadn't been able to circumvent the system that they had some of these things. But it was fun. I got busted once at Margaret Jack's Hall on the weekend opening a room that I wasn't supposed to have a key to. Yeah. Well, he came to one of my lectures. I gave a lecture at Caltech on backtracking, and I was really surprised to see him sitting there in the front row. It threw me for a loop there. Well, he's quite a guy. Okay, now I've got a big handout for you today, 50 pages long. Can you believe that? I want to explain that handout to you. This is going to cover you for a little while for preparation. We're having guest lectures, as you know, starting on Wednesday for 4 in a row. Next Wednesday is Jeff Ullman, whose talk has been advertised as how to get rich by writing, or something like this. Leslie Lamport on Friday, Nils Nilsson a week from today, and then Mary Claire a week from Wednesday. Since you know Mary Claire from the book that you already own, but I want you to get to know some of the other authors, so I've got examples of their writing in this handout, and I'll talk to you a little more about that later. First, I should say about publicity for this. You can tell your friends that they're all invited to. These are also like colloquia or something like that. It's a special thing that these people will maybe once in their life be. For example, Jeff may never again give a lecture on how to get rich as an author, and Leslie and so on, and Nils. So these are special opportunities that other people who aren't taking the course regularly might want to know about. And we didn't get into the colloquium list for Leslie. We got Jeff's in there, but for some reason they didn't pick up on Leslie's talk on Friday. So I'd like to also make sure that these special lectures are heard about by people that you know that would be interested. Now, in this handout, let's see, what else do I have here? Okay, so in this handout, I start out with a short piece that Lamport wrote that I thought was an excellent example of a flame, but it's a finely done thing, because there's so many people talking about the controversial thing about WYSIWYG languages and so on, and he's got a way of presenting it that actually has some technical content to it. So that's a nice short little 4-page thing. Now the next one is from Jeff Ullman's book, the Principles of Database Systems. Jeff, I think, has written 12 books by now, but 13 and 14 are coming out soon. And one of the things that he's just putting through our typesetting machine this month is the 3rd edition of this book, which will actually have a different title, and it'll be a 2-volume set. And he's finished the 1st volume. It's about to come out, so he's going to use some examples in his talk on Wednesday I mean, the first part is about finances, but most of it will be about how to choose examples when you're writing a book. And so this is fresh in his mind as he's talking. And now I've selected excerpts of one of the chapters that I thought was that I know is well done, because I had to read it when I was on the comp committee last year. We had a question that on the comp that needed the knowledge from this chapter, and so in order to understand the question, I had to learn this much about database systems. And I like this chapter a lot, so I show you so you can read it too and see if you don't think that it succeeds in getting very complicated issues described very simply. It also shows me that I should make TeX easier to use to generate ruled lines. The book some lousy copy preparation person at the publishers went and drew these lines in here, and they spoil the rest of the book. But they don't look as bad on TV as they do in the handout. Now, so this talks about rather complicated issues in concurrent things on a database, but I think it makes extremely easy to understand what the issues are. And he also has a little algorithm that I think is a model of how to present in a short space for his readership the testing of if a schedule can be serialized. He explains what serialized means. Algorithms begins there and finishes. Here's another thing. Finishes in a brief time, and he has a way of then giving two examples followed by a proof of the algorithm that it works. And anyway, it seemed that was an efficient way to present that. Then I skip about 20 pages, and I give something from the end of his chapter, which he calls optimistic concurrency control and timestamps. And again, he has a very nice way of presenting something that this must be much better than in any of the sources that he had to work with. So, worth reading. The next excerpt in your handout is by Lamport again, and this one is I think one of the best technical reports I've seen in the last 12 months for sure, but also maybe in the 80s, that I've ever seen. The idea that he introduced a style in this report that is amazingly effective. That he hasn't used in any other papers, as far as I know, neither has anybody else. But certainly ought to be considered for more things because it works so well. Even after the novelty wears off, I believe this will be an extremely effective way to do it. So what I want to talk first about is not the content of this, but the format of it, which is pretty nice. He has this unseen question asker in here, who asks the questions that he wants the reader to ask, but he also thinks probably the reader is asking at this point, and allows him to bring out the points. And so you have, are you proposing this? What do you mean by this? And here it says, just what is a system? Here's somebody says, the real system has many properties. No formal method can specify which ones can be specified, and so on, he says. And so I believe that he is faithfully recording questions that people ask him as he's presenting, as he's talking to them in his office and giving. So he's addressing all the issues, and this is so effective as a way to do it. Otherwise, you want to cover those same points, but this way does it in a way that anybody can understand. And he has a nice example. I guess the paging is backwards here. We have right-hand page. This is a left-hand page in the report, and it's a right-hand page for us. So these actually this illustration would be facing the description. But he talks about a machine that you deposit quarters or $half and dispense soda. And as an example of something he wants to formalize system, he actually has a footnote for readers unfamiliar with colloquial American English and United States currency. He tells what soda is $1.50 in his footnotes. But now, the main thing is the format. Now, it's not the same as Plato's dialogues with Socrates, who was very effective in his use of dialogue. But in a way, it's not the same. And those were games where Socrates really is trapping the other people and making them commit to some position before they realize the consequences of their commitments. This is different. This is teaching in a different way, where it's a dialogue, but it's not the same kind of a dialogue as you find in the people in Socratic dialogues are going at a different protocol. Really. The questions get a little longer toward the end. Not too bad. I mean, sometimes there's commentary as well as questions. This specification is completely bizarre. It requires such and such. How can you possibly implement it, and so on? And then the answer, it's bizarre only, and so on and so on. Now he has a long question, which has Greek letters in it and everything. So that's okay. It gets into the style where if this had appeared on the first page, you wouldn't have understood that this was you wouldn't have understood that this was a nice dialogue. But by the time you're here on page 23, it's okay. This is the right way to ask the question. Then the guy goes to the blackboard and puts alphas and betas on it and asks that question. I haven't given you the whole memo here, but I've just given an excerpt so that you can see the use of the style. And if you want to read, if you want to learn the subject, you have to read the whole memo. But this is I encourage you to browse this for style. Now, I guess Galileo used dialogues very effectively in his scientific writing, and he would have, but it was more of a, what is it, trialogue? What is it when you have 6 people in a dialogue? Anyway, he had people. I don't remember the names of them, but there was one guy whose name wasn't exactly Stupidus, but it was something like this. Simplicius? Yes, okay. And so there are different personalities among the different people in Galileo's dialogue. Alfred Régnier wrote a nice little book called Dialogues in Applied Mathematics that has 3 dialogues. One goes Socrates and a mathematician of his day. Another one is Archimedes and King Hieron of Syracuse, and another one takes place in the Middle Ages somewhere. Maybe Galileo is involved in that dialogue, in fact. And those are very well done, where Régnier is presenting there his philosophy about mathematics by putting words into the mouths of ancient people. But I haven't seen dialogue used very much in technical writing, except in George Danzig's book on linear programming, where he has a chapter that introduced this technique, as far as I know, to the 20th century writing. Do you know of any other examples? And I'm not sure. Yeah. Well, anyway, that's one of the rare cases. Now, I used it in my little book, Surreal Numbers, where there's 2 characters in the book, and they're known as A and B, and Alice and Bill, and they have definite personalities that developed as the book came on, and I tried to, and they're discussing things back and forth. After a short time, I found that I could really be effective in presenting a flow of ideas this way. And again, I tried to be honest. These are thoughts that I actually had as I was thinking of the subject. This book is a presentation of some ideas that John Conway told me at lunch one day, and jotted down on a napkin, and I lost the napkin. But I decided it would be a great example of a case study in research, how to do research, and so I had the characters actually reinventing Conway's system in this book. Meanwhile, I was also reconstructing it myself from what I remembered of the conversation we had a year ago. And so the false starts that I made and so on are also made by the people in the book as they do it. This book I wrote in 6 days, and then I rested on the next day. I guess I tell a little story about it. I'm not sure, but I tell this story so often. I'm not sure. Have I already told it in this course? No. Anyway, it was probably the most exciting week of my life. Was the week that I wrote this book. But I don't think I could ever recapture it again. But I look back on it still with great pleasure. I rented a. Okay, well, let's see. I discussed with my wife. We're on sabbatical in Norway, and I discussed with my wife that I thought it would be neat to write a book like this, and this was after she had already lived with me, for about 12 years, and I'd been more than 10 years. I'd been working on the art of computer programming, and she knew it would, I wasn't done with volume 3 yet, but I got this idea in the middle of the night, and in the morning I said, Jill, I'd like to write another book. You remember how we've been working on this art of computer programming for 10 years and all this? Well, no, but I think this one I can do in a week. So to my surprise, she said, this sounds like the right time in your life where you could do something like this. Here we are in Norway and everything, and so she was encouraging, and in January I went and got a hotel room in downtown Oslo, near where Ibsen used to write his plays. I thought I would get some of the be able to pick up some of the nuances there, we figured that this should be an intensive week where I would just work on the book and nothing else, and we had always read about people having affairs in hotel rooms anyway, so we planned that she would come and visit me, So I got this room, and I worked nothing else but writing that whole week, as I say, it was the greatest week of my life. I would since I was trying to capture dialogue in this book, I listened to what people were saying with the different ears than I ordinarily listened to. There was a whole bunch of students from St. Olaf's who were at the same hotel visiting Norway at that time, and I overheard what they were talking about at breakfast, so that I could see if I could use any of the lines in my book. Then I go outside and I look around and I walked around the city for 2 or 3 hours in the afternoon every day, because it was in the morning I would write and I would write pretty fast, and then all of a sudden I'd run into a problem that was sort of insurmountable, what to do next, and go outside and just walk around the city for a couple of hours and get my head cleared. And at this point, I'm much more perceptive to trees and flowers and leaves and buildings and everything else, just because I'm writing about things. The fact that you're writing and trying to capture something in word makes you forces you to be more perceptive about the world around you. And so I was going through this, and then I would come back to my hotel. All of a sudden, the problem would resolve itself magically, and I would then have a nice, relaxing supper. In the evening, it comes time for lights out. It's time to go to sleep after all. And so I turn out the lights, and then the next chapter flashes into my mind, and I have to turn back with this thing on. I have to put on my glasses and everything. I really didn't want to wait that long, but I have to write it down. And the thoughts are coming so fast that I don't have time to write down the words, but I can only write down the first letter of every word, So I'm going down and writing the first letter of every word. Then I turn the lights out, sleep very well, and so on. The next morning, I have to figure out what those first letters meant. It came out okay, and I'm ready to go for the next day and everything. And this was 6 days, and then at the end of the 6th day, I went and took a walk in the King's Garden, beautiful tree. I just can't tell you how pleasant it was. The hoarfrost on the trees, the sky was a deep blue. I gazed up at these trees in ecstasy for an hour, just wandering around in this garden. But I had finished the book too, and I was really happy. And on the 7th day, I tried to write a letter to Phyllis to tell her how to type this manuscript. And I couldn't write a single sentence. I'd get into the middle of a sentence, and it was just like Russell Baker. I couldn't finish the sentence. I couldn't remember what the point of it was going to be, and so on. All of a sudden, this muse that had been sitting over my shoulder for 6 days disappeared. And finally, I got a letter written and got the manuscript sent off. And but this was something special. Now the book hasn't been a commercial success. It sells about 200 copies a year, I think, something like that, for 10 years, 15 years. But the publishers are very nice, in fact, just to keep it in print. But it's been translated into about 7 languages, and I know a lot of people have used it in classes and did like it, but it hasn't taken the world by storm. It was an opening thing for me, first of all, to understand a little bit about how writing in a novel format increases perception. Secondly, how a dialogue format can increase the ability to make technical points very efficiently. So, the next handout here is from Nilsson's and Genezer's new book that just came out recently, Logical Foundations of AI, and this was based on the course they taught last year and the class notes and everything, and the students went through those and made lots of suggestions so that they could go through. And I'm giving you an example here of a chapter that I know they found hardest to write, and so they drafted it several times, and I think it's a hot research area in AI, and it's something that hadn't been ever presented before to an audience at the level of this book. Here it is already in chapter 6, and they had to really rethink all the ideas in order to get them presented well. So here, I think, is one of the great pieces of technical writing, being able to take this new thing and present it in a way that is done well. The choice of examples is good. The way things go hang together with examples, the informal and formal combinations, all done extremely well. So I've again covered sample pages here so that you can see how they achieved it, and talking about circumscription and all these ideas. Now, here he has a theorem. This is my only complaint here. There should have been a space after the theorem. I attempted to cut this out with the scissors and slide it up before we made this handout. But he has a result which he's given by examples, and then he discusses the importance of the theorem, and then he proves it, then he gives an examples of its use, and it's all as I say, done with the right level of formality versus informality, it seems to me. Another thing in his book that they had to work hard on was innovations on typography, how they were going to present logical formulas in a way that looked reasonable, and they chose this typewriter style font for it, and that actually works well in their examples. The way they can have something that looks like it's comes from a database, knowledge base, because it's in a typewriter or a computer terminal like style. It's more effective, I think, than the alternatives. So that's worth looking at. Now, the last handout here is extracts from a paper that I was co-author of, and I actually wrote the final text of the article. And this is something that that presents two difficult theorems. As far as I know, there are no simple proofs of these theorems. And I present this handout just to illustrate what I thought was a somewhat innovative way to solve the problem of proving the theorem. Now, I haven't made the proofs of the theorems trivial in this presentation. As far as I know, there's no way to do that. But I think I have been able to communicate the proofs that we had in the most effective way by the ways that I chose in this thing. So let me explain what that is, and then you can judge for yourself. Now, the first theorem was an algorithm, was a construction telling how we could decide if a graph could be put together into a straight line in such a way that you never had to stretch any of the wires more than length 2. So what I want to do is I want to take these, and I present this with an example here. I have 27 letters, isn't it? X, Y, Z, and ampersand. And so these 27 letters are to be put into a straight line in such a way that any two that are adjacent are connected by a line here, are either supposed to be next to each other or most one apart in the final thing. So you could, from J to K to L to O in the final thing, you might actually have K before J and then L after, because that was J to K. You can still skip one to get to L, but you can't. But you couldn't have. You can't have too many things. You can't have anything. Most one more letter between J and K, one K and L. Now, the point that I'm trying to make here is that the only way I could think of to motivate the construction that we're giving is by first presenting the reader with this little puzzle. And I think this is the kind of puzzle that you could put into an airline magazine or a puzzle column, brain teaser type of thing. People can easily get the idea. You can solve it in 10, 15 minutes, and after you've done it, it's not unpleasant 10 or 15 minutes. And after you've done it, you will understand why the problem isn't completely trivial, but you'll also understand that there might very well be an algorithm that would solve the problem. So this gives you all the intuitions that you need in order to read the next pages. So then I present an algorithm. Now, the algorithm itself is the worst algorithm, the most complicated algorithm that I've ever had to present, and as far as I know, there is no simpler algorithm. So this next page here presents the end of the algorithm. I don't give you the algorithm itself. I didn't dare. But notice this here, case 3.4.5.3.3.3. Now, we're into a bunch of cases here, and this as far as I know, these cases are all necessary, and so somebody actually put this up on the computer science bulletin board a few months ago, and I took it down, but had made this little note on here. It says only in computer science. And so obviously, making some kind of a reference. So here I was, but as far as I know, there's no better way to present this algorithm. And it's very true. This is only in computer science. I mean, somehow the ability to handle lots of cases is the computer scientist's strength and weakness. It's a strength in that we seem to be able to handle a variety of cases fluently in our daily work. We have to be able to write computer programs that involve 10 different kinds of operators that we're allowed to do, and these are diverse from each other. We handled this kind of complexity reasonably well. That's probably why we became computer scientists. On the other hand, it's a great weakness too, because then we don't try for unity when there is unity as much. We aren't encouraged to, like if we were more pure mathematicians, we wouldn't handle this. We wouldn't consider this even an option to have this many cases, and so we would never solve the problem that needs cases. But what if we get to a problem that doesn't need cases? We'll still come up with a solution that has them. So that's our strength and weakness, I think, for computer science. So it's a true comment for sure. But this was, as far as I know, the only way to prove the thing, and I was able to still boil down and make the cases understandable to anybody who needs to know. And actually, we had people who read this, believe it or not. But basically, you get the idea by solving that puzzle. So that was the idea. There was presenting the little puzzle at the beginning. The puzzle was chosen in some way that it could be done, but it also primed for the rest of it. Now the other theorem was also very difficult, but completely different way. By the way, I get to use the puzzle to describe the algorithm as well. I mean I can use that figure and then show how the algorithm solves the problem mechanically. Now, but the second part is another result, a construction of a different kind called tree bandwidth is NP complete, and this is a reduction of one problem to another that requires quite a complicated construction of graphs. Now, these were theorems that my co-authors had invented, and it took me a long time to understand what was going on. But we decided to put this all together in the same paper, and so finally, after thinking about it a lot, how would I ever present this in a way that anybody could really could understand? Finally, I came to the realization that maybe people in biology aren't so stupid as I had thought before. Namely, the people in biology have all these words that look like complete gobbledygook to me. And DNA used to be that you had to know not only that there were 4 things in DNA, but each one of them had a 6-syllable name or something like that, didn't it? I mean, now they finally abbreviated to letters. But at the first part, you knew them by these long names. And I always thought that was really strange. However, in this paper, it turned out that it was easier for me to actually use this technique from biology and a little bit. And I was dealing with things that in computer science we would normally call tree structures, which uses botany terms from that part of nature. But actually these things were more floating than rooted. And so I went to the encyclopedia and I found out that what I really wanted was jellyfish, something which so of course I'm writing a scientific paper, so I talk about pelagic hydrozoa, of the order Siphonophora. I'm trying to be very scientific here, but I got over that in a hurry. But really then I say marine biology. So the free trees we shall construct bear more resemblance to pelagic this is swimming, and hydrozoa are these things that go in the water and animals in the water, right? Zoa and animal and so on. And this is an order of Siphonophora, which includes jellyfish and a bunch of other things. And so we find it convenient to use terms from marine biology rather than botany. And so then I talk about the things, and these things have stems and polyps and tentacles. And a word like tentacle especially is reasonably easy to identify with somehow when you're doing it. Now, and there were filament, and then the important thing here is the nematocysts. Now, this is a word that has not appeared in computer science journals before. It really means stingers. Yeah. And I could have called it the stingers, but I decided it was better to call them the nematocysts. I don't even know how to pronounce it, but I'm assuming nematocysts is right. But having this word was very easy to read the rest of it, because you knew what a nemat. I mean, I don't know. We're fairly good at picking up that kind of a word and being able to associate it with the tentacle, and it became a technical word that was of use only in this paper, but still, I believe, was absolutely better than calling it group of vertices or some other, some other term that had been used before. So by using a completely new term just for the purpose of this paper, still it was possible to to get the points across, I think, in a way that's better. That was easier to follow the proof, and the rest of the proof then could be read. In my opinion. Mary Claire?
If it turns out that this result is more generally useful, are you going to be sad that you call it nematocyst rather than stinger?
No, I don't think so.
I am.
Maybe I would. But then I would tell the people, let's call them stingers. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I am sad, I was sad about terminology before. That is, one of my first papers I wrote talked about a kind of language called LR of K grammars. And I never realized that this was going to become a subject in textbooks and things like that. I just needed something that meant translation from left to right with look ahead K, and I just, without any thought whatsoever, I just needed an abbreviation for it, so I said LR paren K. And then this turned out to be a big subject for a lot of research for the next 10 years or something like this. And I didn't really, since I hadn't given much thought to it, it was already there, though. There was no way to change it anymore. So 5 years later, I tried to think of a justification for having that many letters. Why didn't I just call it L of K or something like this, you see? And so 5 years later, I thought of a way to define something else that could be LL of K and RL of K and RR of K. And so then we had a family of 4 related methods that could be understood in to have some logical sense to them. But actually it didn't in original. And I sort of just forced myself afterward to think of a logical sense. And well, it seems to have come out okay in the end. But I wasn't proud of it at the beginning at all. Okay. Yeah, good point. Now, so I won't have. Okay, now Ramsey, please push the mic button.
Yeah. Wasn't there some time in volume 1 or volume 2 in like a first edition you used some terminology, but everyone else
was using another one, and then I changed it. Yeah, this was I think the most dramatic example of this was in volume 3, where it's with respect to the word oracle, and I had originally decided to call it demons instead. But everyone in theoretical computer science was using the idea of an oracle. An oracle is somebody who, if you have a question to ask, you ask the oracle, and the oracle tells you the answer. And the oracle might have more computational power than you do. So you say, how fast can I solve this if I have an oracle helping me? But I had in my original draft I had used the word demon instead of oracle. There was no general thing for this, and so I got help from the underworld in the original case, but finally the new one is in terms of oracles. And besides which, AI picked up demons for something else. So not only was I not using the right word but the word I used became something, especially at MIT, I think there were demons all over the place in certain AI languages. I don't know any more about demons, but they were anyway. So there I had to change it. I don't know if it was between the first and second printing, or if I got to change in before the book came out. Now in case of Aho, Hopcroft, and Ullman, there was a last-minute change of terminology. At this time was 1973, and all this things about NP complete was brand new. In fact, people weren't calling it NP complete; they were calling it polynomial complete. And everybody who was first hearing this term polynomially complete was completely misunderstanding it, because it really meant that you couldn't do things in polynomial time unless a conjecture that's probably false is true. And so it was just it was not a right term. And so I wrote to people the same year, while I'm in Norway, I also wrote letters. I was giving lectures on this in Oslo to learn it myself, and so I wrote to people saying, look, here's a choice of 6 different terms. Should we call these Herculean problems? What else? And other people were suggested to name problems. One of them was called Algian, I think, was one of them. People who know classics know this problem of cleaning the stables. Well, anyway, we had various things, and finally, and so we had the theoretical computer scientists of the world sort of were voting on a questionnaire. What should we call this thing? And the winner was NP hard and NP complete. And this was from a large set of interesting options that came out. And Jeff Ullman had just and Aho and Hopcroft had just sent their book off to the publisher, and we're at the galley-proof reading stages. And they said, "Oh gosh, it's just too late. We can't possibly make all the changes from polynomial complete to NP complete everywhere in our book. And it's too bad, but it's just it's too late." And I was very glad to see 2 months later, when the book actually came out, that they had gone through and did all that hard work and changed every place, and it came out NP complete, and the name and the good name stuck then. There are cases where when you expect the terminology is going to live, that you want to really give it some thought, and in this case, the nematicist, I don't know. I don't think it's going to live.